Okay, first thing to do is add butter. Now you need to add, you can see there, just holding my hand against it, that'll give you a good idea of how much butter that is. The butter is essential for how I'm going to cook this chop, to give it the flavour that it will end up with. The butter isn't there just to grease the pan and stop the chop from sticking to it. So put on a huge amount of butter so that you cook the chop sitting in a puddle of butter, not just a little thin veneer. And once the butter's melted, put the chop on the pan. Now I'm going to hold the camera with my left hand so I can add the salt with my right. You're going to be shocked at the amount of salt that I'm about to add. Let me just do this and I'll explain. Okay, that's the amount of salt to add. Pork is incredible at the amount of salt that it will absorb. In fact, despite what that looked like, when you go to eat this, there'll hardly be any salt flavour in it at all. I know it looks really deceptive having that amount of salt poured onto it. You think, oh my god, that's just going to be like putting a teaspoon of salt in my mouth, but it actually isn't like that at all. The salt reacts with the meat, don't ask me how, but it contributes to a really beautiful tasty crust, and as I say, the actual salt flavour as such, it doesn't completely disappear. You can taste that the meat has been salted, but it just really enhances the flavour in combination with the butter. So let it sit there for a few minutes, and then I'm going to flip it and salt the other side. Now the other thing that's really important is there isn't much heat. You can see the butter isn't furiously bubbling away. In fact, there's so little heat that I can actually put my hand comfortably down there, almost in the butter, and I can just leave my fingers there indefinitely. That's how low the heat is. So a nice gentle steady heat, and if you can't put your fingers down there like that, virtually in the butter and on the surface of the pan, it's too hot. And the reason I cook meat like this is because it doesn't dry it out, and it adds beautiful rich flavours. Simon's searing technique produces a certain type of flavour which this doesn't. This is quite different. I prefer a nice gentle heat. I'm not criticising Simon. I'm just saying that I think this produces a much tastier, juicier meat. Okay, flipped and salt. There we go. Now the rest of the process is just quite simple really. You just keep regularly flipping it until you get to a point where it's got a nice rich brown crust on both sides, and then you let it rest for at least a couple of minutes, and then you eat it. So there you go, it's been cooking for about 10 minutes now, starting to get a bit of a crust on it. The thing to also be aware of is with this amount of butter, whenever you flip it, you lift it up and there's an empty patch where it was sitting. There's no butter, well there's a little bit of butter there, but there's no puddle like the amount around the outside here. So just use this stake to sort of sweep the butter back under where you're about to put it down on, so that it's back in a puddle. And there it is, the finished product. That's about 25-30 minutes of cooking time. I'm just going to wait for the other side to finish, and then it's going on a plate, and I'll leave it for a couple of minutes after I take it off the heat, and then it will be ready to eat.